Hello, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started here in a few minutes. We're just waiting for everybody else to show up in our classroom today. So we'll get started here maybe two or 3 minutes.
Okay.
So, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Is somebody online? Can you let us know if you could hear us?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Loud and clear.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you all for joining us today. So we are here for this HSIP work session that is being put on with DOT&PF. Thank you very much for DOT for sitting down and having this work session with us. So I think the opportunity will be to walk through the presentation here with Anna and Pam, and then kind of talk about the process for HSIP. We're going to talk about nominations as well, potential nominations that may come forward as a recommendation from AMATS at a future date, and kind of go through all of that. So this is really an opportunity for us to engage with each other, to have a nice open discussion. Just recognize this is being recorded. This is open for the public to be here as well. So we're just here to listen, learn, and engage where possible. So feel free to ask questions, that kind of stuff. There's no formal rules or regulations right now for this. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Anna and Pam. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Anna Boson, Central Region Traffic Safety Engineer. Hi, I'm Pam Golden. I am the State Traffic Safety Engineer. And this is sort of awkward because of people there, and I feel like I should get up. And loud. I feel like it's probably better. Sorry, folks on screen, you won't get to see me, but not trying to be fancy at all.
There's a delay in advance.
Okay, so you know, my part here is really to talk about what the process is for the program overall. And for background, I was Anna's counterpart in the northern region for 12 years doing regional traffic and safety. So I've seen it from both sides. And so, you know, there's a lot going on and we're trying to make things better and progress things. So we just sort of wanted to talk through like what it takes from an idea to being a project. And then what's required in our process. So we do have a very formal process. We have a HSIP handbook. It's available online. Anybody can look at it. But it starts with the 3 regions screening data because data is our driving factor. Our whole program has to be data driven. Historically, that meant documented crash data that we got from either law enforcement or a self-reported crash. We'll talk a little bit more about how we've opened that up to some other things. And then the regions sort of look at, well, how could you fix this problem? It comes to us at statewide, and then we advance projects. But that's just a really quick nutshell.
And I'll just share with you the screening that we have as a handout, and I'll share it later for those online. That is the screening that Pam said. This is step 1. So that's.
Yeah, as soon as we know our most recent year of data is validated, we let the regions know they can start doing the screening process. And so this year we're going through the end of 2023. So when we screen, as Anne said, she's got this here that we've got the handout that you can look and see where things sort of lie within. This is the AMATS specific, right? This is the AMATS specific list.
No, this is our region-wide, but
region.
you can.
Okay.
The first 35 are within the Anchorage area.
So we start with all crashes, but then we do what's called a sliding spot analysis. And the focus of the HSIP program is to reduce or eliminate serious injury or fatal crashes. So that's what we do our analysis on. Our first, wash is, was there a fatal or were there 2 or more serious injury crashes? The regions then look at patterns and other data sources, but when they send their nominations to us, they tell us why they did or did not do projects on that location. That is the one piece that is a federally protected thing that we don't have to share. But maybe there's a project that was already done, or maybe there's no pattern. It was a one-off fatal crash in a rural location, sort of thing. Yeah. Do a little karaoke in the meantime. The crash data sources. Yeah, okay, I'll just go ahead and start talking about it. So, see, it's because I was getting ready to talk about it. So as far as other data sources are concerned, we do have our safety concern reporter app that's been live now since September, I think. This is the Anchorage area. I just pulled this morning. Anyone can go in and see where a concern has been reported. We're trying to retool it away from winter maintenance and potholes. It tended to get very heavy on that. We're looking for more of the long-term issues. This one, in fact, is not a pothole. So we have a dot.alaska.gov/be safe. There's a safety concern app. You can scan the QR code. You can ask for it later. But so Anna has access to this data. We're trying to figure out how to do a regular pull from it. Fast Planning has asked for this, so we can certainly do a pull that can come to AMATS as well. There's third-party data. Many of you have worked with Anna on different things. So she's got the INRIX data, which speed things, some safety analysis things. It could be Strava data. We're really open to what is data at this point. And then, of course, any existing plans that exist, we're formulated the data. So any existing AMATS plans, anything that's been coming out of the Vision Zero Task Force. So we want all of that to be considered as data when we look at projects and locations for projects. Okay. Most of you have probably heard of the proven safety countermeasures. If not, welcome to proven safety countermeasures. Federal Highways has a list of, I think it's 29 now. Some of them are planning tools. Some of them are physical things you can do, like these are the pedestrian and bicycle ones that they have. So that's one of the key locations we look for. Hey, we have this problem. These are proven time and time again. There is a crash modification clearinghouse that you can go to. It's cmfclearinghouse.org, I think, and you can like, okay, my issue is red light running. And it will bring up a whole series of research papers that have been done on red light running and what the countermeasures are to choose from. And then the regions find one or more things that'll target those crash types. And that's where we start looking at, does that work in this location? Does it align with an existing planning document? We don't want to come forward and say, we're going to do X, and the existing planning documents say, we'll never do that. So those sorts of things, we want to make sure we're in lockstep with planning that's been done to date. And then we start looking at cost effectiveness, because our program is required to have basically the biggest bang for the buck. So we want to maximize lives saved per dollar spent.
What does CMF stand for again?
Crash modification. Sometimes you'll hear them as crash reduction factors, and it's just like the inverse of the same thing. So then when it comes to us at statewide, that's when we review to make sure that the projects are eligible, that the CMFs that were selected were appropriate. So Anna sends us a, hey, I'm going to use this CMF because it's not in our kind of pre-selected list. And we look at it and we say, okay, yep, we can do that. And we think it's applicable because this, that, and the other. And then we sort of, each region then prioritizes what they submit to us. And then we take that as statewide, sort of fold that into the bigger picture. So the highest benefit cost projects, score is a weird word, it's not really scoring projects, but they get prioritized for funding at the highest level. So our funding process comes down to what gives us the highest return. There are always going to be things that have to get moved in or out. It doesn't happen often, but we can get to the point where we run out of funding and we have to draw a line. And it just means those projects, they're still eligible, but they might have to wait till the next year for funding. We always keep that list going because projects slip, as we all know, so that we have something to try to bring it back in. Key to Highway Safety Improvement Program is it has to conform to the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. But we did ourselves a favor in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan and made sure it said all projects that are eligible for HSIP promote the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. So that should never be a hang-up for us.
Want to talk about safe systems?
We can, I'm sure this group probably is familiar with the safe systems approach, and our Strategic Highway Safety Plan is framed around the safe systems approach. So we do say within our, or Anna will say within her nominations, what areas they target. I'm not sure, did I have anything else? This is the end of my stuff. One more. Okay. And eventually it'll say that. Sorry, I did not get this Fairbanks picture out. I was in a hurry this morning. So once we have the funding plan is established, so basically we've ranked all those projects. We said they're eligible. This is who gets the highest priority. Assuming we didn't have to draw a hard line in the funding, that's when we authorize the regions to go forward. This does not factor in how projects then get incorporated into the TIP, because that is something we're working through the exact process of how that happens. It is different in each 3 MPOs. So that at statewide we say, that's your problem, Central Region. But again, it's very lockstep. Last year, it's just getting through the process. And then it just becomes a normal project. What is going to get tricky is we have different flavors of funding, and with them now being more detailed in the MPO tip, it really takes away some of the flexibility we had to move around what gets us towards our goals of meeting penalty funding and some of these different flavor of funding type issues that affect the department and August redistribution and some of those goals. But we'll work through it. That's about all we can say on that, is we'll work through it. We're going to try to make sure none of our penalty funding ends up in the MPOs. That is very difficult, because I will say that the lion's share of our program is within the Anchorage area, dollar-wise. So with that, I'm gonna turn it back to Anna, and we're gonna step through, like, what are these higher ranking corridors and intersections and locations, and talk about possible project ideas. And I'm just here to go, this is not eligible, or yeah, that would be eligible. Yes, question.
I can ask a question real quick on the screening, when you do the high crash location screening, is that exclusively DOT roads? Or
No, it is all roads open to public travel.
All right, so I'm going to reshare my screen for those online that, so you can see the same screening list for Central Region. And so I've been bringing this list around to presentations on safety in general. So I brought it to the Matsu area, I brought it to the legislature before their session. There was an Anchorage area session review with the legislative representatives. And in general, the list, although this is through 2022, it's a 5-year list. In general, the same roads are going to show up year after year after year in roughly that same order. So they might move from, a 3 to a 4 1 year and then back to the 3. But so I wouldn't get hung up on that this doesn't include through 2023. So what I guess I'd like to highlight for this group is, as I mentioned, about 10 minutes ago, the first 32 are all within the Anchorage area. And I would say the Anchorage Bowl. So that's something to take away for our entire region, that is where the highest, from this screening process of 1 fatal, 2 major injuries, that is the beginning part of screening.
I'm sorry, I did not throw this slide in here this morning, but when we presented to the legislature, I think a really key thing that's important to the discussion here today is 68% of all pedestrian serious injury and fatality crashes are within the municipality of Anchorage, which only has 40% of the state's population. So I just wanted to highlight that overrepresentation. And I know we've been doing a lot of vision zero and those sorts of things, but just sort of keeping that at the forefront.
Yeah, no, that's great. And if you haven't seen Pam's presentation to the legislature, I highly recommend it. It was a really great presentation. It goes into more depth on the safe systems approach, some of these statistics from a statewide perspective, and then narrows down to different regions. It talks about funding and eligibility in more depth. So I can drop in the chat a link to that later. So for the purposes of this workshop, what we did about a year ago when we had a workshop was to also look at the AMATS safety plan, because that plan had also gone through a robust public involvement process, had provided some guidance on where to put our efforts first. We did come with an understanding that from the workshop, then the next step would be for the technical advisory committee to make a recommendations to the policy committee on where DOT should put our focus for the next round of nominations. What I'll share with you is that the next round of nominations is normally in July each year, but September 1 is where we're because we're having some staffing changes, we are going to, for this year, move it to September 1 instead. So that actually provides, all across the state more time to develop nominations for this round. That should afford the technical advisory committee and the policy committee some time to really go through. Last year was a little bit of a rush to get things together and really put together worthwhile nominations.
And is that us having to get it to you with all the information or just like the basic information?
September 1 is when we would move forward. Now, we do always have this ability, if we don't have all of our funds expended, to do the supplemental nomination process, which we did this year, in part to give some time to tidy up a couple of those nominations. That is likely still going to be on the table next year. we're just wanting to make sure we hit our October 1 federal date. It puts a lot of pressure on me to get from September 1 to October 1 a funding plan. But we want to make sure that the state gets to continue to move forward because we don't want to hold up Juno or something else. But I would not say the supplemental nominations are off the table.
And so if we work backwards from September 1, I would ask from a region perspective to have, at least 2 months of time from a recommendation from the policy committee to our office asking for, depending on how much detail you have, a request for a nomination in this corridor or in this intersection or these lists of intersections. It depends on what the policy committee decides, but give my staff and me 2 months to then put together the actual nomination. And what that also affords us is then we can collaborate together during that process like we did last year, where we met on site, we kind of understood some site specific issues, I could research what's eligible, what's not eligible, and then we can have a more robust nomination to send forward by September 1.
So we'd be looking June 19th or 20th, depending on when I can get you the letter after, if it's approved by the policy committee then, but that should be enough time to fit that 2-month schedule.
Yep.
So I'll flag it as June is the meeting to get it on there for the PC to review it.
So, and to piggyback off of what happened last year as well, was the policy committee had put forward from the safety plan recommendation to DOT to nominate, to put together a nomination for DeBar Road corridor and Mountain View Drive corridor based on a number of factors. And so after that recommendation, DOT staff from the region and city staff and the AMATS staff met on project site locations for both those corridors. And we worked collaboratively on those nominations. And then through the process of submission, we were able to successfully get Mountain View Drive nominated and approved in this recent supplemental nomination. So it did take some time. It's iterative because both those corridors have a lot going on in it. And so I'm grateful for the collaboration that happened across our agency, and then also, across our partner agencies with the municipality and AMATS. In addition to the request from the policy committee, Central Region did put forward a number of other nominations, and so those were also selected for funding. And so those were Northern Lights between Lois Drive and Lake Otis, because there was a pavement preservation project underway. We reviewed the crash history there and some other crash modification factors that are out there for a lane drop. So that was put forward for Northern Lights. We put forward Ingra and Gamble 3-laning those corridors. And so we got that approved. There's also some other HSIP projects going on in that corridor. So those might happen at different timeframes, but they're underway as well. And then A Street, the variable speed limit on this Seward Highway for the traffic safety corridor, that was one that was approved. And then during the supplemental nomination, A Street road diet from Fireweed to 9th Avenue, including a signal at 16th for crossing. And then the Mountain View Drive nomination. And then the last one that I'm grateful for is one that's going to be more of a quick collaborative project for Anchorage is a Vision Zero implementation project that'll be signing and striping and some speed feedback signs for Tudor and Muldoon, based on our action plan that we've been working on with the city of Anchorage, and AMATS staff, for the last 9 months. So that's kind of a quick update on which projects have happened since I started in this position about a year ago, on where we're at with HSIP in the Anchorage area.
Another thing, with, let's call it a changing of the guard statewide, the region, et cetera. We've been, it is a little bit of a cultural shift where we're looking at bigger, more expensive projects. We used to sort of one-off, like, scratch modification factor, we're just gonna do this. And there really has been a push to really look at the corridors as a whole. And I hate to use the term fix everything because we'll never fix everything, but think beyond just one specific user type. So that it caused us some challenges in getting and moving forward, but awesome collaboration that we were able to get that going. So we don't have to think small.
And so I guess at this point, I think maybe I'll just be quiet and look to our partners to talk about what you guys want to know, what you spitball ideas, if you have suggestions to discuss.
Do you want to go like through
Oh,
the
yeah.
top 10 or so of like what's already being done, or is this one that's still, sorry, just a suggestion?
Question
Yeah.
real quick. So you mentioned the previous projects that were nominated by AMATS. And so Mountain View Drive was successful, which is exciting to hear. What about all the other nominations? Do we as AMATS need to renominate them? Like,
So
does
the
that may
bar-
come from the policy committee to be like, okay, we gave you a list of 9. How many made it, how many didn't? And do we need to renominate the ones that didn't make it if they're still a priority?
Okay, that's a good question. So maybe I'm misremembering. I recall just the 2 corridors, the Mountain View, no, there were other.
We had all 9. We had a letter that we sent you with 9 of them in there.
So I'll have to review
I
that.
think most of them were the state ones.
Yeah.
Are you thinking just Unity or are you thinking?
Well, yeah, because we sent a letter with all 9, and those were the ones that we had originally talked about, but then they got whittled down because of the limited funding and
Gotcha.
everything like that.
Gotcha.
And I think of that list, only Mountain
Is that
View.
the list
and
that
one
included
other-
Turpin and some of the others?
Yes,
Okay.
well, Turpin was removed. by
Right,
the
removed.
committee. So yeah, it was that larger list,
Gotcha.
and so I'm like, do we need to go back to that list and renominate them?
The majority of them.
Thought most of them made it. I know Turpin and Boundary, there were issues with Turpin and Boundary.
Yeah.
To go back, and DeBar Road, the issue with DeBar Road is we want to coordinate with the PEL, the Planning Environmental Linkage, that currently shows some work potentially through the Airport Heights neighborhood, so I don't want to get in front of that document. And then on top of it, the city's US DOT grant for the Safe Streets for All at the Burgaw and DeBar intersection. We want to make sure we're coordinated and know enough about the scope of that project and the impact so that we're also staying out of the way or aligning with that. So that's why the DeBar one is kind of in a pause right now.
Sorry, let me clarify because I'm an idiot. So we had 2 corridors that were submitted by AMATS, DeBar, and Mountain View. And then it was the letter of support
Yes.
for the Central Region nominations that we provided with you for the 9-ish. The Turpin was removed, so 8 of them. So I think what I'll need to do is maybe just work with you guys and figure out which one of those, which ones to move forward.
I think most
I
of
think
them.
most of
And
it,
then report that to the
and
committee.
from the
Gotcha.
statewide perspective,
Mhm.
we don't necessarily need your letter of support. It is a nice to have, and it supports that this is aligning with existing plans and all that. It doesn't hold a Central Region nomination up completely from going forward. It's just like the confirmation that this isn't in a slap in the face to something that's out there, that we're not doing something contrary to what is presented. And I have a question. It's because it's, do you have a Safe Streets for All grant for speed management? Okay, but it has not started.
Speed study.
Speed study.
Speed studies or speed management?
Well, that's a good question. So so the Breda Safe Streets and Roads for All grant included a piece that was a community-wide speed study. I'm trying to remember exactly.
Speed man.
So is it to target speeds for road types and that sort of thing?
Speed management plan. Okay, so it is.
That is one thing we're looking at more broadly is potential HSIP. So,
Oh, to fund one of those plans?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
but if you have a grant, then
So I would just add to that, because of the 5-year timeline that's attached to that project, we're looking at how to address that project. The timeline starts when we sign the agreement. So we're trying to decide the best timing for signing the agreement. And with that plan, the speed study plan, actually, the good news is it can happen in the pre-NEPA phase. But we won't start getting reimbursed until we sign the agreement. So we're not clear yet for exactly when we're going to be able to start funding. There's 2 other components that are like demonstration type projects. Those have to wait until after the pre-NEPA phase. The design and construction of we do those. But the good news is the speed study. All it's waiting on is us to decide when signing the agreement and starting the 5-year plan makes sense.
okay, great. What I want to at least have out there is if you identify these target speeds, like speed calming projects is an HSIP eligible project. So while it may not be pertinent this year, as that stuff starts to dial in, those are eligible projects for HSIP.
Does that same notion go for the existing approved AMATS safety plan? If that safety plan recommends a treatment, then it's kind of already.
Once we get the data.
So one of the things that comes to mind is downtown speed limits.
You're gonna get rid of your code, go speed.
And do the state statute of 20 miles an hour, right? So is something like that HSIP eligible?
Well, to refine everything, it should be, it's, right now it's, code being less stringent than the state code for once, but, that, if you make your code change, then yes, we have some projects like that, like if it was just like, hey, that would be eligible.
So we've got a couple of areas that we've done kind of studies on, but not using any sort of federal process. So if we have a study that supports like a change, can that support a used to help in nominating project?
Yes, all data. Crash data is king, but all data matters.
Do you have any specific studies in mind that you're thinking of?
Yeah, we actually have a study on a full design for the crossing the pedestrian signal on motor lines at Nichols, basically. But obviously the design wasn't done using the federal process, so I don't know that the design fits us anywhere. Study we use basis for design. We have another one for the curve on Northwood, the kind of merger. Second, if that and I again. So just be, just a like signage upgrade type things.
What I would at least strongly recommend on those is bundle to the sense of the federal project because the process is onerous enough that if you're not doing enough to make it worthwhile, it's just like, oh, that was great. It's like 8 times.
So what we can also do is, if we looked at an area-wide crossings, for instance, crossing upgrades with devices, we could start looking at, because the other thing is that devices have changed over time. And, so we want to make sure when we are introducing some of these newer devices that we also include kind of a public awareness campaign, that we put them in enough places that they become the standard instead of a one-off weird thing. So I bring that up as, for instance, like hawks. If we were to put in one hawk, which is technically a beacon.
Yes.
But, it's a crossing that, is a regulatory beacon that people are supposed to stop, and yield to pedestrians as they cross, and then they are able to proceed, versus a full signal at some of these locations, which stops traffic and you have to go through the whole cycle. So I bring that up as we've had a number of communities at community council meetings that we've had for Vision Zero ask for various crossing treatments. The hawk would be a brand new type of treatment for this region. It's in the other regions, so it's not like it's brand new to Alaska, but I would recommend we have like 5 or something of those in our region, and we pick the highest ones based on crash data and based on plans that show that this is a particular location that should have a crossing. And then we could package that up.
Exactly to both your point. Last year, Juno sent me a one location pedestrian improvement. I think bigger because, and repackaged it, and I think it's 10 locations now. Because now it's just a Juno-wide pedestrian improvement project, and it's tackled lots of places instead of the one with the screen allowed us. Same sort of thing. Like it really does make a lot of sense. And we have a hawk in Fairbanks, and we did the coffee states, and we paid for all of that with federal funding because it was the education on this. And so you do have that larger grouping of similar type upgrades. It really can get that education piece.
Was it delivered by a consultant or who did all of the?
So the hawk in Fairbanks was actually part of Beaver Scout, which was not an HSIP project. But we did our Bs with the HSIP, and we've used the coffee sleeves a lot. People in Fairbanks. And so it's a really effective way to like, hey, before you go sort of thing. So
Is there anybody, I can't see the chat, so is there anyone online that for public meeting?
Sitting there for a minute.
Yeah.
It's like going on the table where there was tickle.
that was me pushing my chair. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I was really suggesting to Anna running through that top 10 or 15 because I think most of them are already addressed in something. And so it's just sort of an easy, like, this is why we're not doing something here. Or what's missing, what have we not thought of on those fronts?
About because it's data-driven crash numbers. Like Brandon said, the example on Northern Lights Boulevard, that one have crash data that supports something that could give us that cost benefit.
We looked at compliance with the signal, so look at alternatives that might increase compliance. And found that actually the signal that's currently functioning shows better compliance than alternatives. So the nation ended up being to just make upgrades to the crossing itself, the signal, just to kind of increase, put in some new best practices, I guess. But yeah, I don't know if there's a crash modification back there.
That's where I was like saying, James Starzak, you just reached out to PM&E this morning about Elmore and Coventry pedestrian crossing. How do we get something that is maybe not, has data of crashes, but it would support safe crossing? Is that it really wouldn't rank high as a problem in the HSIP
On its own.
scoring world, or like, how could I get something like that?
There's a lot of fluff in the program in general for non-ranked.
Okay.
We have a hard time as a state filling up our program with solely ranked projects. And there are things like TCD compliance that are always going to be eligible, that we have to fit into the program. So we have some discretion to make things fit.
can also do systemic.
Systemic projects also, systemic projects get a bump over a single location operation.
So even if we have maybe crash history of a similar type of location, and then we want to make a consistent upgraded thing at a bunch of other locations, then that would also be, you know, an eligible project.
And we were really trying to get at things like unmet demand, serve people here, just in that way. Yeah.
How does the program work for Brandon example, where that signal would never probably beat signal warrants in today's day and age? Upgrading it, is that a giant red flag?
Call it upgrade. That takes away the red flag. Don't repair, don't replace. It's upgrade. Figure out what piece of modern technology is missing that makes it be.
But also, I mean, I do want to say, like, personally, I think there's a lot of missing crossings versus putting a lot of effort into an existing crossing that sounds like it's performing okay right now. So I just, you know, it is a cost-effective program. We should be focusing on the list of locations that have the highest needs first. And then depending on the scope of that, if it's just some additional inlaid markings and signs, that's one thing. If it's full hardware replacement and upgrade, you know, we've got a lot of things that are not current standard out there that it would take up all of our money. For instance, if we wanted, we're in the process of updating the Alaska traffic manual to comply with the new METCD. The new, you know, requirement will be a signal head per lane for all traffic signalized intersections. And right now across Anchorage, we have what, 300 and some? So I don't, you know, we can't just add more signal heads to the existing poles. So we're doing a signal head per lane project on INCRA. It is taking us years. And so we would bog down the entire program if we tried to upgrade all of our signalized intersections. We would eat up all of the money. And so we have to do it strategically and through our other pots of money to upgrade things as things are reconstructed. Okay, so the list that you have, Gamble Street, #1 in the entire region. Now, I mentioned earlier, we have the utility poles are coming out. That's HSIP funded for that corridor. The signal head per lane project, that's an HSIP project. Lighting is going to go in. That's it covered with HSIP once those poles are out. And now the other lane drop, just 3 lanes is HSIP. So those are the kind of comments that I would be reporting to headquarters on why we're not going to add another nomination to this corridor for this round. Two is DeBar Road. We talked about kind of the reasons why we're not going to have a nomination for this year for DeBar Road, but we are having a road safety audit on DeBar Road. And so we're still learning and meeting and discussing the issues surrounding DeBar, which will feed into a future nomination and the adjacent projects in the area. So I will likely put a comment into that we will be doing the road safety audit for that corridor. 6th Avenue. Again, kind of there's a lot of other adjacent projects in the area. This could be one that we might need to pull in the data and start looking at.
Is there a specific section with 6th Avenue?
It's the whole 2 miles of it from start to 2 miles out. So I would guess it's all the way to Airport Heights, basically.
Where it ties back.
Or where it ties back in, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
And Anna, go ahead.
Would, if the muni takes over management, would that affect any of this?
No, this is all, no matter road owner.
All public roads. And Anna mentioned the road safety audit on DeBar, and that is a great, like, hey, this road's puzzling us what to do. The road safety audit, there can be a package of road safety audits completely HSIP eligible. They are specifically HSIP eligible in federal rules. That can be a really great way of getting to the, do we throw the kitchen sink at it? What's really, like, what are some interim things we could do? And that, I would really encourage considering, like, okay, hey, you know, we've got these 6 roads that we're just really not sure do a road safety audit package. And then that really sort of dials in what the build project becomes down the road.
So HSIP can cover.
So we got absolutely since CFR.
So if we had projects like in our safety plan, we could select the ones that haven't been looked at for other things and say, let's do road safety audits of these 6 that we have here, and then see if it can lead to a nomination in the future.
And what's nice about those is they're planning, they don't necessarily need to be in the tip, so we could turn it around fast.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not saying that the tip is the reason that things are not happening fast, but it's just one less hurdle. So that's another, go ahead.
How long is a typical road safety audit? How long does that usually take?
So it depends if you want to look at it summer and winter. And so, to do it, it's gathering the data, like looking at what's there. It's a day or 2 in the field and a report being prepared. Thing about a road safety audit is whoever owns the road, whether it's DOT or the meeting, what's to respond. And it might just be like, hey, we agree this is a really great thing. Well, we think this is funding, or there's no way I'm not straight. Like there's sort of that whole variety of things. I'm not sure Central Region has had one done to them, and I say that we've had locations where others have done RSAs that DOT has received, and I don't know. Have you had one?
I think that you're rotating between regions too,
So
right?
there's-
So I think
there's
maybe next year.
That project, yes, but prior to that, I don't know that Central Region ever. We had like the Richardson Highway, the out of Tasmania was done by the with the tribal project. So DOT has been the recipient of road safety audits. This project program that we're starting up is the first time we're really actively going out into it.
So maybe like a 6 to 18 month timeline, depending on it.
They're-
Maybe even quicker than that.
Maybe even quicker.
They can be quicker.
Would an RSA have to be managed through the DOT like AMATS and HSIP projects are, or can that be purely passed through?
I think that would probably be an HSA or an RSA situation. We're continuing to talk about how, we work on those LPAs or local public agency agreements. We're still working with that. I was on that one. That's super Central Region. Talked about it, with the regions, the vast development and then city engineer. So there's a lot of those discussions happening right now, but a lot of those examples on complete pass-throughs to local agencies. I've got examples from other states that are 400 or 500 page documents. We're hoping to start like a beginner. Here's a couple pages of how we get this thing started. There's a lot to it.
But they have
pass-throughs.
like like Fairbanks and stuff, those have been like DOT managed. It's not like money just goes to local travel.
So those came from
Other
EIA, they came from
Oh.
other federal agencies. It's different tribal safety planning programs. DOT, I think that DOT, we did one on Badger Road in 2015. And it actually led to Badger Road HSIP project. I'm a huge fan of road safety audits. But when you get a road safety audit, you get recommendations for short-term, low-cost things, intermediate term, long-term fixes. Like that's sort of what that recommendation, it's independent. We did a road safety audit on Pink City Street. Y'all would not be on the committee. It would be somebody independent who doesn't have any inherent bias as to why things have or haven't been done.
On the
So it's
jurisdiction.
meant to be completely an independent lens so that we don't all come at it and go,
Mhm.
But it also has other stakeholders there too.
yes, law
Enforcement,
enforcement, maintenance.
school district personnel, and that's the, yeah.
So it's multidisciplinary and independent of the engineering side of the regulation.
We can participate, but we're not leading it and we're not like reviewing and commenting on it.
That came before the committees, and TAC advised that we wanted tutor to be added.
Yes, so there is a package that statewide did
Okay.
that gave each MPO 2 locations, each
Okay.
region 3 locations. And that's what He's referencing.
So that is happening, right? That's out.
That is happening.
Is it out to
The request for proposals just, so that whole process.
So we should anticipate maybe later this summer that we'll get a request to start showing up. So I would say that that's probably an update that we can provide to the committees via you to let committee members know, hey, the consultant's been selected, look for an invitation and update on this project. Okay, so number 4 is Benson Boulevard. Also about not quite 2.5 miles long. We did have a severe injury pedestrian crash that happened on Benson. Kind of, I forget what the cross street was, but it was just west of Arctic Boulevard. And then 2 years ago, we had a fatal pedestrian crashing at Benson and Minnesota. Those are the ones that come to mind in recent time.
And there was a cyclist at Benson A, I think I remember this about a year or 2 ago.
But as far as Benson goes, there are no traditional projects proposed and no HSIP things that have recently happened, correct?
So it's 4 lanes, the majority of it. Do we need 4 lanes?
I'm putting a note down, there's a possible nomination, Benson Boulevard lane reduction.
That's one we've had internal conversations. So,
And in that,
there are needs there.
At Minnesota, it kind of has some weird lineage going on where, and so some reconfiguration of that intersection would allow for an additional crosswalk on one of the legs that does not have a crosswalk.
Going back to the RSA, these are perfect days for an RSA to start dialing in, like,
So,
we can go forward and say, oh, we want to do everything, but did we miss something?
so targeting that intersection, doing a crossing there and fixing kind of as it widens to 4 lanes, how it does that. I think we definitely have things that could be done on that section of fence.
so we have a sidewalk project on Minnesota Drive.
It's gonna look at adding those crossings as part of that project. So it completes the 4th leg.
So as Benson to the west of Minnesota is increasing, because it's like the top is starting, how those lane configurations are. So, yeah, that can be, there's definitely some opportunity there. The rest being 4 lanes and how it serves into town, that's a little bit bigger. Maybe not quite as easy and has other implications for the system. Is this something that we should put a nomination together, or I guess there's the sidewalk project that's looking at it.
So I have it down, Benson Boulevard lane reduction, review the area west of Minnesota. So I think maybe what we need to do is put this on the list of things to bring to the committee in June and have that discussion as part of it. That's what we're trying to do today, is get the ideas of, should we look at these projects, should we nominate them? So maybe it'll give some time for staff to pull some information together and bring it to that June meeting and have that kind of final decision.
Yeah, at the lowest intersection, that's also one where I know the city's got a project on lowest and 32nd, but DOT is running, I think, there's an AMATS project of that kind of ties into it. So
I believe there's a corridor study too on Northern Lights and Fence. Maybe Starzak has some more information on that. It's still online.
I'm not hearing.
I'm still online, but it is kind of hard to hear what you guys are saying. More information on what, Luke?
Corridor study for Northern Lights Benson. I thought we had one of those in the queue.
We do.
We do, yes.
When's that kicking off, or is that underway?
We expect that to start up, well, let me see, let me make sure I've got my timing correct here. We've got tutor program before Northern Lights. We could start either one of them. But one of either tutor or the Northern Lights plan should be kicked off late this year. We can go either way with that.
So, I mean, the sidewalk project is coming through. It sounds like that's addressing a little bit of it with adding the fourth crosswalk. And I think it's also addressing some lighting maybe on the west side of the road.
There's a lot of improvements there. We're having conversations on, getting in touch with AMATS staff and just talking about kind of all the different improvements that we've got there. Because right now, I think it's in a pavement preservation pot of money.
Yeah, we got a lot of things going on in all these corridors. You know, we've got the corridor plans, and honestly, it starts to be a timing thing, especially when it's handed off to design and then like figure out what's going on any of these roads. It just stifles the progress. And not to say that, you know, that's not worthwhile to like, you know, spend a couple of years before you complete your environmental document or whatever. But, you know, federally funded projects are very linear in their progression. And so if you spend a bunch of years, you know, doing a bunch of work, then, you know, in the end, you're at least 3 years after that, maybe 4, especially with even these signalizations and other things to do all the utility agreements and, you know, especially on some of these community roads, you know, we're gonna have to go out and do right-of-way survey because all that's right up against the right-of-way line, almost guaranteed. So then, you know, that's half of the year. You just start stacking all the stuff on top of each other and the requirements we have to go through on the federal side. It just takes a lot of time and energy. And so if we can have like big picture views of what it is that we want to do, so that way we can proceed down that road, you know, that's helpful. If we start tossing in HSIP money into existing projects, we're running into exactly what we've got on Northern Lights, where, you know, we have this great nomination for a lane drop that's being added into the sidewalk project. That's also being added into the, you know, the pavement preservation. It's like this great conglomeration of money, you know, from a lot of different pots to do something that's meaningful for the community. But at the same time, it's, you know, we've gone back almost a year or two into the progress of the project and like reset everything from a normal project development standpoint. And so, you know, it'd be great 5 years ago if we would have, you know, sorted a bunch of these things out. But, you know, it is what it is right now at this point. I don't think you can wait. If we're gonna actually do something on Benson, I don't think you can wait for the Northern Lights Benson study to get done, because that's gonna be 2 years down the road. You know, we have something to action. You almost gotta start now. We got the Minnesota sidewalk thing that, you know, is gonna be doing, you know, maybe some treatments in there. Honestly, right now, FHWA doesn't really have great guidance on what we can and should do on pavement preservation projects. Kind of leaning into it, knowing what some other states are doing, but FHWA is not giving us clear guidance on what's eligible and what's not on pavement preservation projects. And so we're kind of putting, we're leaning forward for sure on some of it. And, you know, what might be beneficial for AMATS to do is to move some of those pavement preservation kinds of projects out of the pavement preservation list into named projects, and then that opens the door for us to really do anything. So whether it's those sidewalk projects, if we want to like go and do some stuff, or like L&I, we're going to be talking about lane drops on that. And really without FHWA's like very clear guidance on that it is eligible, adding it to a named project, you know, that's got a real tip ID, that clears it up. easily. As opposed to out at table 7 or whatever it's in right now.
It's one of the things I've been talking to James about is our pavement preservation is not working anymore. Because every time we go out there, we have to do 10 times as much work as anticipated because the drainage is failing, the signals need to be replaced. It's just not working anymore. And so it's been one of the discussion points where we're like, maybe we can't do that just holistic pot of everything. And we have to start naming every project
And
and
it's
making
happening,
it a little bit bigger than,
it's happening to us on the non-AMATS.
Yeah.
Pavement preservation projects. Diamond Boulevard, right? Like, do you go in and fix all the failed storm drain systems underneath it? Do we also do a lane drop? You know, while we're already there digging up every bit of it, you know, under a pavement preservation, do you do a lane drop, right? Like, is it eligible? All those kinds of questions that we're asking ourselves and asking FHWA and others for guidance, you know, even within our own ranks, you know, up to the statewide level, you know, is this permissible? And there's a lot of differing opinions within ourselves and in FHWA, even though, you know, we feel like there's clear guidance coming from, you know, a lot of our educational things that FHWA says that, you know, this is where everybody should be. But when you go and ask the question right now, it's, nobody's got an answer. They all got to go back to DC for clear guidance and stuff.
I mean, in my mind, because the safety is such a significant concern here for the non-motorized users, I think that should be kind of helping to drive maybe some of the projects that we select in the future. That we could do kind of what Sean is recommending is pull it out of the pavement and then make it a little bit bigger of a project to do some more of the work. So if like we select I mean, some roads we're just not gonna be able to handle, like doing that on Tudor Road. There are some roads that are just beyond what AMATS can do with our funding capability. We're very constrained as of right now because all of our projects have cost so much more than we originally anticipated.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, Minnesota resurfacing was like $14 to $20 million, and that was just for the urban portion, but not the free. But Tudor, we just started, or we are starting a pavement preservation on Tudor, right? And because we're gonna have 3/4 inch ruts on it by 2028. And so, you know, assume that we're out there in 29, 30, like the rut development gets really steep because everybody rides right in those ruts, you know, once they get deep. And so we have to go out and repave it. Now, while we're out there, should we toss in some other, you know, some other treatments? And, you know, I think the general feeling is yes. Now, is it eligible, you know, by FHWA? Should we toss in HSIP money? You know, should we do all these other things? I think we should. The question is how to make it all work, especially when we've got, you know, corridor planning things going on. And it's all coming at the same time.
Well, I think we can move forward on projects while the corridor plans are going on, because most of the projects that we've been talking about would tie into the corridor plans fine. Like lane reductions on roads, we already know that there's probably places we can do that just based on our experience right now. And that shouldn't preclude us from doing that while we're doing the corridor plan. So,
Yeah, I 100% agree with that statement. I don't feel that anything needs to be held up because of a corridor plan. These are 20-year plans. They're very long-term. So putting everything on pause just because we have a plan coming down the line in a year or two that's going to be finalized in 3 to 4 years, that doesn't make any sense. And I think we can use rational decision-making to ensure that anything that happens between now and the plan's finalization isn't going to be of such magnitude that it would disturb the process or go counter to what we're trying to accomplish.
okay, real quick, we do need to move on, so.
I was just gonna say one thing on the HSIP program, life of improvement. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I was just gonna, you and I are gonna take that there. So HSIP investments need to be there a minimum of 5 years. No rule now?
Never has been.
Oh, I thought that was the rule.
It was a
It was an understanding.
strongly understood thing, but when questioned, federal highways could not produce.
Oh, okay.
So
So now we're, okay. But
that said, we want the benefit
That's-
to
yeah.
be
That's a
there.
pretty good guideline,
Yeah.
right? Like, you don't
We
want
don't
to put
wanna
it out there
rule
and
us
then a
out.
year later
Yeah.
realize,
Right.
oh, I'm sorry.
So maybe shoot for 5 years.
shoot for 5
Yeah.
years. I think that's, because they are cost-effective treatments
Yeah.
too. They're not gonna be the Cadillac, they're gonna be, the Buick, but
Yeah, and I think there's a sort of a sliding scale there. If it's a low cost improvement that's only gonna be in there for 2 or 3 years, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if we're investing $15-20 million, we want it to last a while.
Right, and I think the public would probably
Yeah.
agree with that, so. All right, so number 5 is Tudor Road, and it's the whole 6 miles of it. These screenings, they do a spot and they keep going, so that means that 1 fatal or 2 major happened as you marched down the entire corridor. And so that entire corridor is listed here, so it's not because of just one intersection or just one lane configuration in one spot. It's gonna be some sort of issue throughout that entire corridor. That's a lot to take on. Go ahead.
So do we have, you said we have a road safety audit for Tudor? What's this here?
It's funded, it's
Okay.
not started.
Because we went out recently for the fatality that happened at Tudor and McInnes. I know that at Tudor and McInnes, there's been a request for some kind of improvements since I moved up here in Alaska. I can actually say that now, so and so I think I'm gonna bring forward a recommendation to the committees that something be looked at that intersection. I know we have the road audit, I know we have the plan, but I think, based on the history, it might need something a little more quicker. And that might be something like a signal at that intersection. I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the fire department has asked for
At
one
least
for.
twice.
Has anyone looked at the words? Do you know? I know you.
I haven't looked into it yet.
And I think that's one of the things that's.
There's a
calculated
bus
in that.
stop on the other side.
So, but that would be something to maybe look into a little bit more. So I know we said all of Tudor might need some help, but I think we have at least sections we can look at just based on recent issues.
Well, and back to Sean Baskey's point about if we want to look at, pulling it from the pavement preservation and putting it into another thing to do more throughout the whole pavement preservation corridor too. Anyway,
Yep.
so I'm not saying signal would necessarily, that might still be an HSIP.
It has to be warranted though.
Yeah.
Just putting that out there.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a traffic signal to be installed with HSIP, it has to be.
And that'd be something we need to look at.
That is.
Who does that work? Does the
You and
nominator, does the nominator have to fully prove out signal warrants for,
You have to send the signal.
does that apply for traffic modeling for lane drops? Will this lane drop break the system? Does the nominator have to answer that question?
We had a long discussion on that. And you guys are you still looking at through?
Yes, next week we're gonna meet again.
Okay,
Regardless of the outcome of that, AMATS staff will be moving forward with modeling efforts to look at lane reductions throughout our system. So we'll be getting on that soon. And
Yeah.
then we can hopefully provide some of that information that if we recommend lane reductions in the future, we can say at least our preliminary analysis at a high level, at a regional level, shows that X, Y, and Z should be fine as part of the system.
and bear in mind, one of the super warrants is. Oh,
And then, so I guess, Sean, do you know the limits of the pavement preservation project on Tudor Road, by chance?
So from a paving standpoint, there's been a couple different conversations going on. One is in table 7 for the pathway portion of it. There's for AMATS, they've got a pathway resurfacing on Tudor for, I think, a large portion of it. And so right now, I'm just setting it end to end. From a running standpoint, it's largely east of the sewer. That's where you got your higher ADTs going.
We have two pathways for Tudor, one Seward to Muldoon and the other Minnesota to Seward. So we've broken it into two separate in the list.
But my plan is to have it end to end, and then we can sort out what the scope is and all those other things, because I just don't want to, I don't want to change limits, then have to go back for approvals with FHWA.
Number 6 is Fifth Avenue. Kind of similar to the discussion before on Sixth Avenue, so looking at that. And then we do have an existing HSIP project on Fifth Avenue here between Carlock and Concrete that we're in design, so that would also likely be a comment that I would include in that one. The Ingra one we discussed, there is the lane drop there as well as the signal head per lane nomination there. For Goss Street, we've got cities project, so that's the first city road that shows up on the list. Then going down further, we've got Muldoon. So that looks also like it's the whole corridor, 4 miles of that. There's a pavement preservation project.
North of DeBar, yeah, that one's starting up this year.
So initially, I did have a nomination for Muldoon, and we might need to have further discussion on the scope of that. And what could possibly be incorporated for that.
Could we talk about the golf?
Yeah.
Since we have the SS4A money, can we combine some of the HSIP money if we find countermeasures that are eligible in the project, or
I think
how does it sit now? I mean, the fact that it's nominated.
as long as we don't, we don't take something that was funded with this or any other federal funding pot and then say, no, we're just gonna give that to HCP, can't afford it over here anymore. Or we want to do something else, so we can't, like,
Supplements.
we can supplement, but we can't.
I'm not sure what the scope was.
We are looking at a road diet and yeah, and then safe crossings and all kind of things.
I would say we would ask that you spend all of your money, right, from the grant. And then if there's still need above that, then we would look at maybe what HSIP could supplement.
But yeah, like you're saying, if something new is identified, you didn't have in the grant, that's a great counter. That's not mixing anything because it wasn't promised to be funded another way.
Okay, and the other reason is because at Northern Lights Boulevard, we did get some legislative money at that intersection. And so when we applied for the SS4A grant, we had the end at Northern Lights Boulevard, just so that we could include all that intersection. But maybe if we find out that there's more needs there than we anticipated.
But these totally email Anna to toss it to me or whatever, and we can work through any of them. Yeah, and dive deep into, okay, could be fun. Would this be eligible for these gifts?
Okay.
Not sure that, how the funding and, oversight things are working with that, but be careful about mixing funding types that require additional process. Because now all of a sudden you might get kicked into a completely different thing that you may not want to be involved in.
Yeah.
That adds years of process to your.
I mean, you do have that 5-year window that you're really
Right.
tight on, and
Yeah.
seeing that,
We don't want more onerous things happening to us. Yeah.
But that's why, going after one signal, honestly, we don't have resources to manage and have oversight over a single signal. Unless it's like the top in the entire region issue. We've got,
Okay. I was just curious because I saw it on the list. I was like, oh, well, forgot.
And then 36 is number 10. And it also looks like about a full 2.5 miles of it. So those are just the top 10. You know, there's plenty more to choose from this poo-poo platter of high crash corridors. So yeah, at this point, I mean, any other thoughts or discussion? Yeah.
In terms of the nomination and the approval results, is all of that available somewhere on the page?
Sorry, is the approval and process for the HSIP, are those public yet? For all the ones that were approved so far?
No, I don't have the official sign off. Cannot imagine before not.
So after you get the official sign off that we posted somewhere.
I'll be sending in a quick email that says, hey, look, it was signed off on,
But even for the first round,
the first round's out there.
but it's not on our website or
We never-
anything, nothing has. So
You just get notified that we can start them. That the funding plan is approved.
how would AMATS like this information?
I think if you just send me an email, I will send it out to the committee.
Email.
Forward the email on, I'll forward it to committee members.
Is
so they
that
can have it.
sufficient to provide city?
Um,
Do you want it separated? Should it be published? Should it be on a website somewhere?
I guess I'm a little bit curious why you can't just search Alaska DOT's central region HSIP results and it pops up.
Because HSIP is a line item, it's really the only excuse I have, if that's,
So it'll show up in the student.
it's just HSIP.
Oh, right.
It's the only project, now, because these are NPO projects, they will appear TIP. And that, I guess, the public, the piece of that, but our program is just a line item short of what's now in the 3 NPOs. There's usually project websites for a lot of them. But yeah, you can't search for stick. It's just like he, these things, right?
So if you're somebody who's passionate about a nomination and you're just waiting with bated breath to find out, you just have to reach out and bug Anna on a regular basis. Be like, hey, second hear that?
Or
Who to contact.
We are
Yeah.
looking at revamping our HSIP website, along with many websites. That's actually really valuable feedback. Place, a repository.
Somewhat unrelated question, but curious in your thoughts about the relationship between the crash modification and the same system approach and whether using the crash modification masters as your basis for the program is truly consistent with your system.
So on the HSIP side, where we are all about money, it's interesting. We have done some interesting things with HSIP now to support the state systems approach, which really don't perfectly align with HSIP biggest bang for the buck, because we are trying to get at the things that are less engineering. So on the HSIP side of the world, federally, everybody is really still with these crash modification factors on the highway safety office side, which is their grants are open. Okay, just making sure you know.
Pass them along.
And there are data to look over too. It's really difficult. It's like there's this great new approach, and we're still, have footings of concrete we're trying to pull out and to be able to march that way more. But it's what across the country, but it's CMF and real crash data is still that held at this level and everything else is trained. So. But we could totally geek out.
Let's talk about 36th Avenue.
Just put that down on my list.
Okay.
Possible thing for discussion.
Because Paul Van Manningham is saying this road is falling apart, and it is. So if we were to take this entire corridor approach, or could we, or does it have to be constrained with more just spot treatment areas? How big could it
So-
go? And getting
As
two
someone who's
different
written
things
some very creative
done.
nominations. Be careful that you're not fixing the road.
That's what I'm
with
wondering.
HSIP.
How do I do this?
No,
On the other hand-
we would have to look at the
Other
data to
hand,
determine
getting
if
goal
there is
of-
a safety need there.
Yeah,
And then with that would drive what we recommend. So if there are like, you know, fatalities or serious injuries that are happening in the area and they reach the thresholds needed, or just a lot of them, we would put that information in there. Like, here are the concerns. Is it a new safety plan we have? That kind of stuff. We would not mention replacing or repairing the road or the
And
drainage.
sometimes, let's be real, sometimes pavement and drainage have to be adjusted to make a safety improvement
for
work.
the ancillary work that had to happen.
So,
Yeah.
like I said, I have written some creative nominations through the year that weren't like fixing something that's a maintenance problem, but ultimately ended up fixing the maintenance problem to get a safety improvement.
Unofficially, it did.
Yeah, so it's not that it's out of the question, but it also, you know, we have a limited budget program and, you know, sometimes you do have to chunk things up just to keep it so that. And one of the changes we are, we think, making to the program this year is that any project over $10 million has to have a higher benefit cost. It's still very easy to meet. A 0.5 to 1 instead of a 0.2 to 1, a higher benefit cost, and 5 million, I think I said, any project over 5 million, we're actually requiring a road safety audit as part of the sort of that pre-EPA phase to make sure we are marching down the right path. Those have not been approved yet by our leadership or sent to federal highways, but that was what staff level go through two changes we wanted to make to sort of improve the program. Even your high dollar projects.
We do want to fix safety things.
Yeah,
sure. And it might be a combination of strategizing. Do we put it in the general bucket of preservation, or do we look at?
I have
road safety? I don't know. So I would need some help on how to get at everything that we need.
Here's a like immediate need on 36 is at the Spinard intersection. Because 36 is 5 lanes there, it doesn't need to be 5 lanes. It doesn't have anything close to traffic flow. But making the Spinard intersection need to be way bigger than it should be, which is having implications for the pedestrian crossing being twice as long as it needs to be, the transit, like trying to figure out how it maneuvers all of that. So, you know, and but to be able to narrow that crossing, it kind of needs an entire block of 36 from Spinard to Arctic looked at it. So, I mean, some of the questions are like, would that be something that like an HSIP project could help with to make the intersection smaller and has all these ancillary like needs associated with it, or is there some better way to address that?
No, I think it is a little, so the word that you said that triggered me a little bit was immediate, because I just want to make sure we all understand, and Sean hinted at this earlier, not even he was very firm on it. There's nothing quick about federal money, right? And so that's where, and Anna and I had to work through A Street, like wanting to do a quick build and then coming back and doing the permanent. We can only pay for the mitigation once, so you either have to wait for permanent, or do the quick build, and then HSIP's on the tape. So, that sort of things like, you know, thinking about all that. Yes, that's what you have to do to make pedestrian crossing smaller, and you can crash data, or you can near miss data. You guys have great availability of getting data from cameras and things. Like, so very possibly, yes, eligible, but quick is not a word we associate with HSIP.
That is something I want to know, because he's like, this is ringing in the top of his lips. We need help. He needs help.
Yeah, the maintenance will have to be a time.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. And Spenard already has a project underway. And that we may want to talk to the project team about then if there's a concern, or it's not captured as part of.
We already did.
Yeah, maybe not captured as part of the Spenard project.
It's not.
We have to deal with that.
Interestingly enough, 36th Avenue did have an HSIP project on it, probably to widen it to
Yeah.
what it is today.
Like 10 years
But
ago.
that's an entirely different discussion.
And I guess I would.
Widen it.
Yeah.
Perfection
Perfection
has it all.
Perfection has it all. That's where we'll go.
That's funny.
I remember starting at DOT and
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
yeah, that's good.
And I guess pavement on 36, I mean, in my perspective, I would view that's not the truth. That might be the reason why we need to act soon, because rather than them coming and shaving pavement, put all this money into pavement. Where, I mean, if we want to narrow it, we don't need to like repave the 5 lanes, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say that. Yeah, just knowing which streets need pavement preservation far enough ahead of time that we can redesign and improve safety and do all of those things, so that we're not spending twice as much on the pavement that we would to.
It may not be a like replace lip to lip, right?
Yeah, that's the problem is that we need to know almost 6 or 7 or 8 years in advance. So it sounds great, but we're running up against the same thing. Like, to do a Spenard Road, we're probably entering year 5 or 6. I can't even remember when it was first nominated, and I was project manager on it. And, you know, to do something like that, it's like a 6-7 year project, easy. Especially if you got right of way acquisition or anything like that. Utilities and BABA compliance, both of them got sorted out, you know, at that point in time, but it's Spenard Road. Like, even if it's shown, you know, a year or 2 from now, after we get done with right of way acquisition, potentially another complete year in addition to that for BABA compliance.
Yeah, we developed, when I was over at DOT, we developed a timeline for everybody to understand that on average, federally funded projects, 10 years. Expected to be 10 years is a big project, not a pavement project. And non-federally funded, 5 years.
You alluded earlier to, don't worry that this is 22 data because 23 data really doesn't move the needle much. And it would be, not trying to get the word, it would be really interesting to look at 10 years of the screenings to see which of the, I mean, are we looking at the same 20 corridors for the last 10 years,
Yeah.
15 years? Because when we do have this like list of, okay, as we're looking at these projects, know that there are safety issues. You know, and there's always it matters more in the rural settings where you have one fatality. And so it hits the list, it never hits the list because it's sort of that one approach. But if it's the same top 15 and they just kind of jockey around, that would be, I think, an interesting data point. But
What could the RSA gain us on 36th Avenue? I mean, could that just broaden our understanding? And even if we don't tap federal money, that could help inform?
It could inform like, hey, if you went out, widen this stripe and, you know, put up the sign or, it's the little low cost interim steps that maybe we can figure out how to fund through federal sources. Like, oh, we are paying. Or like, those are the sorts of like those immediate gains. And it's still sort of get that, and the only way you're gonna fix this is to rebuild it, but here's some things you could do along the way.
So on the Mountain View Drive, there was this, I understand the nomination is successful to do a road diet in Mountain View. It looks like that's the 24 on the list here. So 36 is like 10th on the list. So if we have justification on Mountain View, it seems we put on 36 too.
Yeah, it's just a matter of, though it sounds like it's an immediate worry.
That one is, but
Yeah,
you got the intersection of Scrum.
I mean,
There's corridor wide.
whether they could slap dab, fix something in an interim and buy us time for 10 years, that could be a question.
I think it would be interesting to see how, if the widening project was paid for with HSIP, how it's changed since it was implemented too. Anecdotally, I think that'd be part of a good discussion for our agencies to collaborate on. You know, the Anchorage HSIP projects. And how they would be a lot in the top 25. No, not everything is consistent, right? We've got actually congestion now is less of an issue. So then we've seen speeds go up. So now we might have a speeding issue that we didn't have in these corridors before. So the type of treatments then that would have risen to the top of the order may not apply anymore, and vice versa. But I will pull those up and see that they like for last.
Okay. Just want to make sure we still got about half hour left. Just want to make sure there's nobody else who's been wanting to ask questions online.
I can't reduce, sorry, this thing came up. I
And it
couldn't,
won't go away.
it won't go away. So
If you close it, you.
I
Shut
will,
down everything.
I will lose everything, but I can also just shut it down and I can log off and log back in. So I might do that.
If you send me a copy of,
Okay.
no, I'm not,
I mean,
I wasn't in the
I have it, I can add it if
Okay.
needed. I think you're fine as is. I don't think it's causing any.
It's causing me.
She can't even scroll up the list. It's just like.
Hold on, let me go back. I was just going to see if anybody had anything else they wanted to talk about. Crash sheet.
Were there any surprises on the list to anybody? I'm just curious.
I thought Mountain View was gonna be higher than 36 and 15.
I imagine 36 is very heavily influenced by the sewer.
Yeah.
So the other thing is this is crash cost per mile. So you could have more crashes on Mountain View, but just higher severity, a few more higher severity ones will push that.
And 36 doesn't even have any fatals, which,
I think that's one thing that's surprising on here for me is Tudor, 27 superseding crashes, 7 fatalities.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's way up there, but it's a fire.
it's because it's long.
Yeah, but it's the length.
It's an imperfect screening process.
I can't think of, at least my recent memory, many HSIP projects on muni roads. But for a big project like a Mountain View Drive reconstruction, would an HSIP project go through the muni's CSS process?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not opposed to going through the process. My worry is that, if the CSS process recommends things that are not eligible for HSIP funding, that would be, we could still go through, and so there might be some tweaks that we would be able to do with eligible things, but then there might be some things that they'd ask for that we were like, no, but I don't have a particular, I don't know, design might have some opinion about it.
Yes. All comes down to process and ability to get things through. I mean, on those, it'll add some not insignificant time to delivery of the project.
So I'm not at all familiar with this process, but all I can do is verbally from experience. But, you know, there are. We pay for offers at the project because it's a requirement for local planning to be consistent with, you know. So there are, if it's just sort of a normal requirement of the process in that area, well, it's just like the federal funding can't be because of HSIP. If it is part of, you know, sort of that local planning approval or the requirement of the local jurisdiction, it doesn't toss that out. Sorry, we paid for it, and I don't know how you can say you don't, because that's how the project had to go.
We had written clarification from FHWA that they would not pay.
Oh, there's some
But-
regional differences.
Well, no, that's
Is that recent?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
within the last 2 years.
Say the arts I'm thinking of would probably be about 3 years ago.
And somebody's definition of art is completely different than, so
Right,
their
public
art
art.
program is send off some money to an art council, and they do their thing.
Yeah.
Now, if we're talking about hardscapes and other things like that, those are different kinds of things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And those are eligible for sure.
But even like plantings, for instance, if the treatment is, I'll give you Fifth Avenue with the Carluck median, between Carluck and Concrete. I did find, in a study that talked about a barrier in the middle, there were like 2 options that had plantings in that study. So I feel like as long as it substantially conforms to that, look, now we have to also talk about maintenance and like who's responsible for the plantings, and that's more of a discussion amongst our agencies outside of it. But if the plantings and the design were substantially close enough to what that study said, then I would feel comfortable with HSIP paying for it, if they don't want to have a cheese grater again, for instance. So still meets the goal of a barrier, but may look a little bit better. And I believe I brought that up to AMATS at the workshop for that project.
Pam, our CSS process is a formalized public involvement process. And it's also ensuring that we're looking at adopted plans and informing just the feedback cycle of listening to the public and, you know, which a federal project does. But then this is just the formalized process where you go to the clearinghouse with assurance that, you know, we've got a staff planner that's looked at everything that we've done with the application. Everything gets heard by the commissions. So, and I have heard because of the cheese grater thing that, oh, well, are we doing the CSS process on HSIPs? And I've heard, you know, that
Then maybe a regional district.
Bumping
We had
it up
to do
might be
everything the Fairbanks and Scarborough wanted done. Like, there was no.
I think it matters on the scope of the project too, right? Like if we have an HSIP nomination for signalization, right? Like, are we gonna go through the CSS process for being in a signal? And, you know, what is the outcome that's going to change and the additional process that's in? Now, if you're talking about Esplanade Road,
corridor, yeah,
right? Like
right.
Esplanade Road, that's a
Mhm.
completely different
Right.
discussion. But again, we start getting into discussions about like, what is an alternative, you know, that they want to weigh in on when in the federal process, it's not the same thing. So,
So back to Brandon's,
And Mountain
question
View.
of Mountain View, I think
Which is a long corridor.
now that we know it was approved, maybe we have the discussion about, you know, what do we agree on for the process for that project, so that we know earlier rather than too late in the process on the alternatives that can be considered. And still meet the intent of the HSIP project. And to not, and to meet the goals of delivery too.
we are having those conversations about like what, you know, what's right for this project and this scope, right? I mean, that,
We are in process, potentially refining the CSS process also that we can maybe hit the DOT process.
I wouldn't say it's even dollar amount related, right? I mean, I think the cheese rate, it's like relatively small. So it's really a project by project basis that maybe for HSIP. So still work through a few times to get it right.
Figure out what the trigger is.
yeah. Last thing we want to do is say every project
Right.
that's an HSIP project needs to go through full-blown CSS.
Right.
Number one is a reactionary thing to the
Right.
cheese grater or whatever else,
Right.
because you don't want to bog down, you know, all the projects with that additional process with, what's the additional meaningful?
Safety improvement too. If
Yeah.
we're really trying to like, let's say, put in crossings, we really want to just get those crossings in. My mind.
But yeah, you're reflective backing on the signals. You know, that-
Yeah.
Should get it out quick.
Great.
I don't think anybody's gonna have a problem. Flashing yellow arrows. And the additional detail we got in there, hopefully that provides some additional opportunities for discussions. On
Right.
HSIP projects.
Right.
While we're talking about.
And during this process too, hopefully, when we're out in the field and we're coming up with the next round of nominations, we're giving enough guidance in the nomination too, to be comfortable with it.
I would agree that, one size fits all doesn't work, but it's not precluded if we wanted to use it for something where we think it made sense.
Office is, that's, I just know the ones, the third rates are borough, all the things within fast.
Our current agreement says that Hayward Preservation and HSIP, and I think even just rehabilitation projects are waived. But we know that that's not right for the certain character projects, right? So we're still going through it on some projects that,
Makes sense.
aren't officially waived or updated agreement for 15 or 20 years ago.
Is there any really cool stuff that like Fairbanks or Juneau's doing for HSIP that just like never hit the radar in Anchorage and share?
We sort of set the bar on systemic, like all the signals were upgraded in the northern region under signal that's cost security, so it reflect the fact that signal hit the lane, but also allowed private signal everywhere. But it was done over the course of, I think, 3 different nominations of 6 or 7 years, so it was sort of a phase.
And that's for what, 20 signals?
88.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's I think there's 22 probably.
Since we sort of pushed pedestrian improvements, it's sort of a broader scale, make sure you're looking at things on a wider variety. You see more of the rural things, see, GARS, if you're familiar with GARS, the combination CFI MUT, that was an HSIP project that started as an interchange, the price escalated. God, if he's listening or his spirit is listening, got the counter nomination of Seward in 36 to the tune of $100 million or something. It was posturing that was eligible too, but it was not, it exceeded the amount of money. So we've had some unique intersections. Fairbanks is a lot of roundabouts are HSIP. When in doubt, roundabout. But it's RFBs, we have RFBs, doing a continuous green T in Juneau and in Fairbanks, both in continuous green T intersections.
For the RFBs, specific locations or systemic?
Being a weird thing where it ended up being a specific location that was supposed to be part of a larger project, but RFBs are pretty prevalent in Fairbanks, so it's with a wide variety of types.
Same with Juneau, yeah, we saw them
Yeah.
everywhere.
Everywhere.
And hogs.
Okay, time is running out and there's a lot left to do, so outside of this. So does anybody else have any other questions, comments, concerns? I think I got a number of notes from this, a number of things I want to follow up on and see about bringing forward nominations in June. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from me some more. So thank you to Pam and Anna very much for coming and helping with this work session. It's recorded, so we'll have it online for anybody who missed portions of it or have any questions and go back later. Hopefully this is something we can do on a regular basis, yearly or every other year, whatever kind of works. And thank you all